Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome back to the Uncut Network. Every month we rotate between directors, actors, and super specific genres, covering everything from exploitation to things your parents will absolutely approve of, relative unknowns to household names, and everything in between. The Uncut Network is the movie podcast of all of the niches, and to cover all those things and more, I'm joined by Autumn. Hello there.
Hi.
Simon.
Hello.
And returning, because he's a glutton for Kiyoshi, apparently, Mike. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you all doing today?
Wonderful. Intimidated by talking about somebody as slippery as Kiyoshi Kurosawa, but,
Well,
you know, we're going to roll with the punches, I think.
it's the best way to be, really, isn't it?
Yeah. As we do on a Saturday night.
Yeah. You can't go on every episode being an expert on every director. We've got our niches, but yeah. I think the interesting thing about doing Kiyoshi Kurosawa is we can do two very, very different sort of episodes. Whereas before it was just if a director's popular enough, it's just 4 random scattershot things, but we can divide it into the horror and the not horror. So that's what this episode is about. But before we get into what movies we're talking about and this and that, opinions on Kiyoshi Kurosawa. You can tailor it to the horror aspect, or you can tailor it as a sort of a generalist thing. But what are your feelings and thoughts? Let's start with order of arrival. So Autumn, thoughts on Kiyoshi?
Yeah, one of my favourite directors of all time, probably. So, yeah, just I don't know what there is to say really. Just very good. I think he's an interesting director in that almost every film he's done is a horror film, even though some of them aren't technically horror films. They're all pretty horrifying. All the ones I've seen, I have to admit, I haven't seen absolutely every single one.
Vast.
If you have.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing as well. You know, there's so much to go through, and it has he has 3 films coming out in this year alone. So only going to get harder to go through them all. Yeah, just great. I think he's really interesting. I think any interviews he gives are really interesting. He has his there's the top 50 Kiyoshi Kurosawa films available on La Cineteque or something, some website, and they're very interesting films. I think one of his favourite films of all time is Castaway by Robert Zemeckis.
Oh, wow.
Zemeckis?
Zemeckis, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a left turn for him.
Let me have a look. He has one of his on there, and I think he has Back to the Future on there as well, actually.
So he is human. That's
Yeah, well, this is what's interesting is that he has. I've always found really interesting about Kiyoshi Kurosawa his taste in films is he's got Indiana Jones on here, Jurassic Park 3. Yeah,
3?
I think so.
No, I take it back. He's a monster.
No, yeah,
He really
Jurassic
loves a
Park,
talking dinosaur.
The Lost World. Or is that number 2 actually? Maybe.
Right,
It has number 2.
Okay.
It has Castaway.
Slightly better, but still
Castaway and Jurassic Park 2, and then it has stuff like Empire of the Sun by Steven Spielberg, and then really obscure Jean-Luc Godard films that from the 80s. So it's a really strange mix of Hollywood blockbusters and obscure Godard films, which I find really interesting when looking at his work, because I don't actually know how popular he is in Japan. I assume he's not
He's longevity,
Yeah.
so I assume relatively successful.
Yeah,
And he hasn't really gone that much outside of Japan to do his movies, so I think he's only done 2 French ones.
Yeah,
so
one
far,
in-
so
yeah.
he's all been quite in-house.
yeah, which surprising. Not, I guess it's not surprising that he's not made an English language film, but obviously, I presuming that he's had some form of offer to make a film in America, just hasn't done it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
And there's been remakes. I know there was a remake of Pulse, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, that's enough to put anyone else.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's.
it lost the soul of it entirely. That American remake, because you look at it on YouTube and you see Pulse, the scariest scene ever made. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
oh, man,
that was my first introduction to him, actually, because I hadn't, seen anything of him before I saw that, 4 exclamation points after scariest scene of all time. And then you watch it and you go, yeah, that's actually pretty freaky. I don't really want to endure that in context. Obviously, I did eventually get around to seeing Cure and then Pulse, and then I didn't touch him again until Chime this year. But he's always kind of been like at the front of my mind.
What are your feelings on Chime? Because it is a obscure little thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I loved it. I think he always works best without context, and I think the more that I've quote unquote understood Cure, the less scary it's gotten. But no, Chime, there's no getting a handle on that one. Like,
I've got to say, fair play for understanding Cure because there's so much going on in that movie.
well, I mean, there's a through line. There's certain things that are deliberately open ended, I think, and I mean, I'm not saying I could write a book on Cure and be like, oh yeah, this is the comprehensive reading, but I think I've got definitely more of a concept of its concept.
Mike, any thoughts to add to the Kiyoshi Kurosawa file? Well, you've said already in the other episode, but anything new to add to that?
See previous episode. No, it's like the more I watch of his stuff, the more I love him, the more I am impressed of just how good he is and just how varied his work is as well. Even just across the films we talked about today, they're all so there is a sort of you can sort of tell it's the same director, but they're all very different films.
Yeah. Like I watched Sweet Home off the back of the last episode that you recommended, Mike, and that's a weird movie. A haunted house movie with melting people all over it, and apparently he's kind of disowned it because the co-director or the producer Juzo Otami, who did a Tampopo, great movie Tampopo, by the way. If you're not seeing it, please do check that out. But he kind of strong-armed control a little bit of it, and he's kind of disowned it a little bit. But really interesting movie.
I was interested to read that article you did about it, because I didn't know all the background stuff.
It's a Resident Evil movie.
Haunted house,
it's one that's by Resident Evil.
There's a lot of complicated things, but it's essentially the origins of Resident Evil, it's from a Tom Mez review, apparently. Is it Mez or Mess? I don't know how you say that. But
not sure.
He had the scoop on that one. But anyhow, the three movies that we'll be doing today are Serpent's Path, which was one of the 2014 movies as well, but we'll be talking about the 1998 version, 2008's Tokyo Sonata, and 2017's Before We Vanish. So we'll start chronologically, the Serpent's Path, and I'm setting a trap here, a horrible, mean-spirited trap, asking somebody to explain the plot of this one. But is anybody daring enough to give it a swing for Serpent's
Can I
Path?
throw Mike under the bus here? Because I noticed that he logged it on Letterboxd this morning. It's been a few days since I watched it, so Mike,
it's been a year since
go for it.
I don't.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, really. It's about a dad whose daughter is horribly killed, and he is basically trying to hunt down the killer with the help of a maths teacher, basically. He's a maths teacher by day, and then does this sort of shady business by night, and that's basically sort of the basic plot of it. But it's this repetitious, ongoing. Sorry?
Shoei Kawa is he's a maths teacher, but he just turns up with sunglasses everywhere and just looks effortlessly clever.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But this is
Yakuza.
Yeah, but it's just this repetitious thing of he's trying to find the killer and he thinks it's one person, and they say, no, actually it's this person, and no, actually it's this person, and it's a sort of, I saw Amber from the previous episode describes like an Ouroboros of violence, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty neat.
And awkward humour of making people sort of like the I need a poop scene is just I know that's squirming. That's brilliant acting. So
That was one of the most upsetting moments of the film. Was like, oh god.
yes, and it happens twice as well. So he's really makes it.
I remember it's the second guy going, don't bother asking for the toilet. It's been there, what, a day already.
Exactly. Autumn, what are your thoughts on Serpent's Path?
It's quite a bleak film. What I think's interesting about Serpent's Path is that it was obviously made at the same time as another film, Eyes of the Spider, like as a sort of duo, very, very, very low budget. Like I don't actually know what the budget was, but I think it's like it was like
done over like the course of 3 weeks as well, so it was a real quick turnaround with those two.
Yeah, I think really low budget. You can tell. I mean, that's not like I don't mean that as a sort of. I don't mean that in a negative way, but you can definitely tell there's like virtually no money behind it, and there's not basically like the crew is very small and the tech is very low. But I don't think it's particularly. I think it actually probably works in the film's favor. Also, I think that I can't actually say his name. I'm not going to lie. The father character, who was played by Teruyuki Kagawa. I don't know.
Miyashita.
That's the character's name.
Yeah, he is like the most like his face is like unbelievable. Like it's so expressive. And I mean, we're not talking. Did you talk about creepy in the horror one? I don't know.
We did.
Yeah.
His face in that is just insane. Like every expression he pulls is unbelievable. And we'll talk about Tokyo Sonata as well. And he's obviously very good in that. I think he basically, I don't know. There's just something about he almost. I don't know. He's just like a very great expressive actor, and this film has lots of moments where he's able to use his face for very various, looking sad, looking angry, looking confused, and I think he really carries the film. Obviously, everyone's quite good in it, but specifically him, I think, I think it's also interesting given I will talk about it, but given that this film is the one that he's decided to remake, I don't know. There must be, he has dozens of films. There must be some reason why he thinks this film is still relevant or needs to be updated to some degree.
Well, I don't know which role he's recast, but one of the main roles is a woman actor is playing that role, so he's mixed the dynamic up in this remake.
Oh, is it a mother instead of a father?
It might be, yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
Right, okay.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Oh, no, just as a mysterious woman teams up with a man whose daughter was killed. So I guess the show.
So
I can't remember.
She's
so
like
she's,
the teacher in this one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still, it mixes the dynamic up, I think, quite well.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, there's a whole sort of, as we said, it's not a horror film, but it's not a horror film. So
that climax in the warehouse is like something straight out of Pulse.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
a really, really intense, horrible, dank. It's like a shootout from a horror film.
Yeah,
it's like there's the shots of a corridor. It's like there's a dark bit in the corridor. You think, oh, hang on, what's going to happen here? You go, no, it's just a shot of a corridor. It's just perfectly normal.
Well,
this is what he does. He instills this sense in you every single turn.
He's the master of empty rooms. He's the master. If he puts a camera in an empty room, or almost empty room, there's lots of like empty space. And somehow it's either terrifying or whatever atmosphere he wants to get out of it, he'll get it out.
Yeah,
somehow.
I think the empty space thing is really important to Kiyoshi Kurosawa's films. I also think I notice it's kind of like the more I watch his films now, especially before We Vanish, which we'll talk about later. But he's also like has this thing about the wind, like going through like curtains or something. Like there's so many shots. There's one in Chime as always. Like just has a shot of like a curtain and like the wind goes through it, and then he just like turns the camera and it's like really creepy.
That's how Tokyo Sonata both begins and pretty climactically as well too. So yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah. So the idea of like empty space and like just like like the wind is very like crucial to this film. Also, the idea of like cyclical violence is obviously like, this film has some elements of Cure in it. I think quite a lot of Cure. Like it's not as like serial killer, but there's obviously like revenge and like violence. It just keeps going on and on. Like I think that's something that's Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I mean, that's obviously you could attribute that to time as well. So I think it's something that
This is
Kurosawa's.
I don't know about directly after Cure, but that was 97 Cure. This is 98, so it's fair to share. It's like
I didn't even realise that. That's crazy.
Yeah, quite close.
Yeah, I think it was the next. I think it was actually the next film he made after Cure. I think. Oh no. Turns out. No, it was Cure, and then Serpent's Path and Eyes of the Spider, which he made in like, they were made at the same time. Yeah.
Next week.
So I think
knowing how long it takes to make films as well, that is ridiculous to do two at the same time like that. He
puts out a lot of
machine.
so many films.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, go on.
Simon, what are your thoughts on Serpent's Path?
I think you can tell that it was shot in a week, but in a good way. It's a bit looser than your average Kiyoshi Kurosawa film, and I think that's what kind of took me aback initially. Initially as well, the concept of it just reminded me, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but there's an Israeli thriller from 2013 called Big Bad Wolves, which is about a bunch of men who get together to kill a paedophile. And I absolutely hate that film, so immediately my back was up at this one, and I was just sort of questioning, like, oh no, is this his sort of like edgy, scrappy sort of exploitation thriller? But no, I think it's a bit more measured, respectful even. Lots of nuance in there as well. I think the structure of it as well also sort of threw me for a loop, because like there's a lot of twists that seem to be playing with the power dynamics quite heavily, which kind of are just immediate red herrings. So I think it's the first accusation of somebody else being the killer. Let's just say that doesn't really hold much power for the accuser, because they are instantly gunned down within about 5 minutes of making that accusation. So it doesn't really save them at all. And I think it's that sort of chaos theory. So there's a lot of talk about these equations of unpredictable outcome, and you've got to pass together all the different parts to figure out any meaning of it. And I think he harnesses that sort of chaos really, really nicely. I don't think it blew me away in the way that the others did, or it landed in a way that really struck a nerve, except for his use of VHS footage, which is always completely horrible.
I've got to say, just on that, I love the detail of him having... I mean, and this ages me, and it'll age anybody of a certain generation, but the identifiable signs of secondary school education where a big TV is rolled into a room on wheels. It's like, something...
I remember that too.
Something very satisfying about that.
But it's not for educational purposes this time around. It's more for I'm going to kill you, and this is why purposes.
That's educational in a sense.
It's discovering something, I guess.
And the way, I mean, not to touch on the way it ends though, but that TV does come into play, and it's possibly the most savage punishment I've ever seen. And you don't see it. You don't need to see it. It's just the implication of what he's done there. It's just horrible things. They're really nihilistic.
It's got a nice evil vibe, I think, which is what you want from Kurosawa. But again, like on paper, this is like a Yakuza thriller, and he still manages to make it a really harrowing existential horror ride, basically. So I think it begins difficult. It becomes difficult to divorce his strength as a horror filmmaker from any other genre, because it's always there. I mean, even Tokyo Sonata. I mean, I'll talk about that a bit more later, but you know, that's also equally unsettling in places.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I think I really like the sort of very sort of detached, cool aesthetic of it. As you get a lot of like long shots. And we've said before about the warehouse, but the warehouse is like, I don't know, I feel like you get every angle of it at some point across the film. You really get a real sense of how big and cavernous that space is, and yeah, I mean, but also how like we sort of touched on it briefly, but there is some comedy in it. Like as much as when he's wheeling into TV again and again, and he's delivering the same speech every time to his new captive, the new person he's interrogating. Even the character of Ariga, who turns up sort of like I don't know, 2/3 of the way through or something like that, halfway through, is almost sort of a slightly almost comic character there. But it's just things very good of being able to still maintain the tension, still have the darkness, and sort of threading those two tones all the way through. It never sort of overbalances it, in the.
I don't know whether this says more about me than the movie, but is there something sort of slyly, sort of nihilistically funny when at the end, I'm not giving any context to who it is, but you just see a pile of dead bodies just there to the side?
No,
it's kind of absurd in a funny sort of way.
It's a little bit. Well, because again, it's used to prove a point to that character, So so it's sort of dark. It's almost absurd, especially when you get sort of big. I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say there's a shootout at the end, sort of thing. It's just so casually violent. Someone gets like a sword to the back of their neck, and people being shot all over the place. But it's all just like it's not particularly dramatic. It's just all just so senseless and all just
happens.
Meaningless by that point. Yeah, by that point, it's just a sort of it's a fury from the characters, but it doesn't feel like that. Again, that's where it maintains its coolness all the way through. As the characters are sort of getting more wound up as it goes along.
I think most of the gunfire as well is in camera, so it's not the same sound of a gun that you'd like find in a Michael Mann film, but it's just something vicious to how it just fills that space.
Just like
it was even down to like the coloring, the color grade that they've done on it makes it look like a fireball coming out of the gun rather than just like a traditional muzzle flash. It's really quite elemental in that way.
And there's lots of people being shot at even long they're dead, and their bodies being kicked around. It's just out of spite, or just releasing this pent up aggression for completely no purpose. The person's already dead, but you're going to just kick the body around a bit as well. Why not?
It is part of this. Let's call it a great tradition of murder mysteries, of serial killer movies, of whatever genre you want to attribute it to, where you don't find out the answers at all. It's totally left open-ended. Is that to its detriment, do you think, here? That sort of senseless, sort of unending nature of it?
Maybe slightly. I think the final line of the film, I can't remember it verbatim, but isn't it something like, "Do you get it now?"
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's a bit of a slap in the face
Yes.
if you haven't been paying attention. But no, I don't think it's especially a problem if you are locked into it, because I think he deals in mystery and open-ended, morality in a very strong way. And even if this is like a sort of minor work, considering that, the amount of work put into it, I don't think he was necessarily poring over this project for years. It was more like a sort of experimental challenge for him to actually like put this through. I think the open-endedness is still pretty strong there.
Have any of you seen the accompaniment, the other movie, Eyes of the Spider, was it?
No,
No,
I haven't yet.
I have it downloaded.
I was going to, but I didn't have time.
It's essentially the same setup, but it's played much more comedically, and there's more of a focus on gang.
Interesting.
I get an actual gang aspect of it. And all I remember from it is just there's one character who rollerblades everywhere for no reason whatsoever. He just really likes rollerblading. And it's like, Very, very different.
Oh well, a little bit of whimsy. That's nice.
I guess that makes sense. You make a film as dark as this one's like, and the other film going to make it's got to be a bit more fun to make.
Yeah. But any closing thoughts on Serpent's path before we move on? Autumn, anybody?
No, I'm just interested in seeing the French remake.
Yes, obviously what
changes.
is changed, if anything's added. Yeah,
It's a lot longer as well, I've noticed. Yeah,
It's longer, I think. Yeah,
oh, is it?
Snap.
which is interesting given how short time was.
It's like 80 odd minutes.
I think,
and Chime was like 42 or
45.
something.
Yeah. The new Serpent's Path, I think, is like 2 hours long, which is quite long for.
okay, it's like an extra half. Yeah,
Bit beefier.
probably give me more flashbacks, maybe, or maybe they'll like character. Oh yeah, I'll be able to see what is extended or what's added on.
I think they're a lot more clear about what the Serpent's Path is from the poster, because the body bag literally just looks like a giant cobra's body being hauled through a field. So even though that image is in the first version, I think this one's going to be a lot more. I don't know. It looks cheekier.
Okay.
I mean,
Is it been updated to modern day? Because it's such a VHS is such a sort of it's quite a potent image in this one. I'm thinking particularly at the warehouse when you got all those you got these video screens up, which is quite a striking image. So I'd be interested to know if it keeps it in late 90s or moves it to modern day and it's showing it on an iPhone or something.
I think it's modern. I think it's modern day. Which is I think more interesting. There's actually already. I think it must have already screened at a festival because there's already a couple of reviews.
I think so, yeah.
Reviews have sort of filtered through.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's got a couple of 5. The top reviewers are over at 5 stars.
Very nice. Very nice. He's back.
He was never
gone, but he's back.
Well, yeah, I think that's. Well, how long was it between? It was like 4 years. Wife of a Spy, 2020. I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that is true.
So that's where COVID probably knocked it on the.
Was that his last feature as well? Wife of a Spy.
Yeah, it would have been 2020. Yeah.
I think he's done little bits and pieces of TV, but nothing as substantial as what he normally does.
I think Wife of a Spy was
making up for that sabbatical, like that sort of cinematic sabbatical, by just releasing 3 films in a year. This year. So.
Well, 2.5 if you count Chime as a full film.
Yeah.
True.
Well, or if you don't.
I think Wife of a Spy was actually also a TV film. I think.
Oh, interesting.
Because wasn't it? It was written by the guy who did Drive My Car, wasn't it? And
yeah, because Kiyoshi Kurosawa was his teacher at uni. Whatever. I don't know what they call it university in Japan, but he was Hamaguchi's lecturer, and he also mentored him when he was. All his student films were done through Kurosawa, marking them.
That's such a wild idea, but it's such a unique one. Not necessarily to Japan, but to the Eastern Asian countries. That's our idea of a movie mentor, like somebody who takes you under their wing and teaches you the way of the. Well, you just don't get it in Hollywood or Europe or. UK.
Not really.
Well, it's I think he's a full-on lecturer, he's a full-on film, he teaches film at Tokyo University.
God, imagine those lectures.
Yeah. But there's actually really good I think it's on the Cure Blu-ray. It's Hamaguchi Kurosawa talking about Cure and also their relationship, and their how Hamaguchi is learned from Kurosawa, and
that's
you can definitely what I've seen of his stuff, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, his latest film specifically definitely has elements of Kurosawa.
That is a very good segue.
Evil does not exist. Yeah,
it's a very good segue as well, because talking about the link between those two movies is sort of it's probably its most important with the second of the 3 movies that we're talking about tonight, Tokyo Sonata.
開いてるぞ。今後我が社も離れて何へか。全て佐々木さんの自由ですよ。
あなた、奥さんには話したのか。いや、
私これでも総務課長でした。
これは佐々木さんに手切りかもしれないな。
今日も帰り早いの？
今日はやることがいっぱいあるからな。
僕ピアノやりたい。
ダメだ。
変じゃんそれって。
ダメなものはダメだ。
軍隊に入るの？アメリカの？こんなに遠くまで来たのに今さら帰るわけにはいきません。
この家では俺がお前たちを守る。それが仕組みだ。
別に守ってほしくなんかねえよ。
お父さん本当はただ説教して威張りたいだけなんでしょ。父はピアノに反対なんです。僕がピアノのことなんか言い出したらどうなるのか。
Who wants? I mean, this is a much simpler synopsis. Who wants this nice easy one?
I'll take this one if you want.
By all means.
This is my favorite out of the three, I think. But I think it's Kurosawa's response to, or his version of what would be a Yasujiro Ozu movie or a melodrama, but with a lot more murder, suicide, home invasions, scenes of fathers sending their kids flying down the stairs, stuff like that. So it is focused on a family, husband, wife, 2 sons. The husband, Ryohei, he is made redundant from his kind of soulless office job. It pays the bills, but it doesn't really set him up with much outside of the job itself. The mother, Megumi, she is a housewife. She's longing to have a little bit more agency in her life, even if that just means that she's going to get a driver's license but not learn how to drive a car. Older son, Takashi, he wants to fly the coop. He wants to go join the US military on the Japanese program that they've got. And most importantly, Kenji, the younger son, he's about 9 or 10. He wants to learn how to play piano. He's dealing with quite a fractious school life, let's say. He has a bit of guilt after basically accusing a teacher of reading some erotic manga on a train. And yeah, there's a lot going on with Kenji's little world. But he wants to learn how to play piano, and Yasuka's parents, mother says yes, father says absolutely not. And it's about his sort of self-actualization from that point going onwards. I was talking a little bit about Ozu there, and I think the thing that it reminded me of most was Good Morning. Has anyone seen Good Morning?
Shameful blind spot on my filmography.
Beautiful
Ozu.
Little film, that.
Yes,
Is that the one that's I've seen this. I've seen the original silent film. That it was.
Oh,
I've
right,
not seen
okay.
the-
All right. Well, in I think it's the 1959
yeah.
version. Yeah. So that one is focused on a couple of children who want a TV so they can watch sumo wrestling, which is met with resistance from their conservative parents. Like I said, Tokyo Sonata. All Kenji wants to do is attend piano lessons, which I think is a bit of a more enriching, less brain-rotting pursuit. The resistance is from the dad, who sees it as a waste of time, which is a bit ironic because he can't actually demonstrate any perceived skills of his own when under the pressure of a job interview, which is very relatable.
I mean, at the beginning, they say we're mothballing this department and moving it to China. You've got to prove you're worth something or get out. And he doesn't even consider any sort of proof. He just goes to his table,
Just
packs
rolls
and
over
walks off.
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's quite a spineless character, let's say. I think also that sort of relates to something that I think it was Amber in the previous episode was talking about the collectivism of post-war Japan, and how I think Kurosawa is definitely looking at that in a sort of rotting way, because there's so much of Tokyo Sonata that is about Ryohei just falling into line quite literally, whether that's the bread line or the unemployment line, as he just passively goes about his routine in his own private existence, but then also to his wife, because he doesn't tell anybody that he's unemployed. So yeah, I think it's just about quite a lot of that post-war mentality that hasn't done Japan any favors, or at least isn't doing Japan any favors in the early 21st century. I think there's a lot of that in the older brother Takashi's plight as well. So he wants to go and join the U.S. Army. Like I said, it's almost like either the healing power of time's taken over, and it doesn't really matter that America nuked Japan not 60 years previously, or it's just about the ignorance of the current generation not really caring about that either. Mm-hmm. So I think it's quite a complex look at a sort of national policy that is a bit outdated. And in that respect, it ends in quite a hopeful way, because it pushes something towards actually, self-actualization and progression and understanding, and doing something that's not about following the herd. I really loved it, to be honest.
It's a remarkable movie. And just to touch back on what I think two of you have said now, and as well as Amber, I think she said it too, but this is a horror movie. Just the sequences in particular with the queue to, I think it's happy employment they call it, just that queue of people just waiting. I mean, it seems like it's better than the system that other countries have got, where you will be offered a job or position at the end of it, but it's just the mindlessness of all those people sort of waiting, and you can see sort of the different layers of where they are in the process, how well dressed they are. It's just smatterings of different social groups in there, and people who've given up and people who are just still hopeful. It's existential horror, I guess. Really.
Yeah.
But it leaves you feeling pretty hollow.
It does.
Until it doesn't. Thank God.
Yeah.
A bit of light at the end of the tunnel for this one.
It does get very bleak as well. Like a friend that he reunites with ends up passing away through pretty bleak sort of world-burning suicide. Yeah, it's a harsh movie. But Autumn, what are your feelings on Tokyo Sonata?
Yeah, I love this film. One of his best, maybe, I think. One thing I think is the ending of the film. Well, actually, I can't remember if it's the very last scene, but towards the end of the film, when he finally plays the piano in front of all the people, and he plays Claire de Lune. It's probably like top 5 moments in film. It's so beautiful. It's a beautiful song, and just, I don't know, the camera doesn't move, just watches him play the whole song. Just think it's a very, I don't know, it's a very...
It's just on that scene, just the thing that stands out about that scene is the crowd starts sort of coming around as he's playing it.
Yeah.
And there's not like this big sort of triumphant moment that you would get in a Western movie where everybody breaks out into whoops and cheers and claps him. It's just the silence of the moment just hangs over that scene. It's really, really quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's not really so much a happy ending. It's more just a peaceful ending, which is probably for Kiyoshi Kurosawa probably quite a happy ending. I think also this is I don't know when the film was written and in production. Obviously, came out in 2008. This is very much, to me, a global financial crash film. It's Japan obviously hit pretty hard by the financial crash. This obviously has, if it wasn't made in response to that, it becomes important due to that. I think. I think also, I think what's interesting to me about this film, and I kind of talk about it a bit, I'll talk about it a bit when I get to talk about Before We Vanish, but I think the politics of of Kurosawa's films, I think, are always pretty difficult to pin down. He's not as we said, talking about some of his path, his films don't really have concrete messages or like endings, or that they don't never really make sense in a good way. So I think it's always quite hard to like figure out what he's actually trying to say with his films. I think, but this is, I think, this is one of the most obviously out of his films. Sorry, like one of the more overtly political or like in politically inclined films. Given how much horror it is given to, I can't remember the main character's name. I don't know what he's called.
Ryohei.
What is it called? Sorry, Ryohei. Yeah.
Ryohei.
But given how much horror is given to his, loss of job, inability to make money, his sort of like inability to tell his wife that he can't provide or hasn't got a job anymore. I think it's also quite a lot. I found it's also very much film about masculinity. The dad doesn't feel like he has control anymore over his family financially, and also, I guess, paternally, because his son's going off and his other son wants to do this thing he doesn't approve of. And then so I think it's a very interesting film. I think the fact that one of the characters goes to fight in the war in Iraq is really interesting. And I don't know what that is trying to. I don't really know what he's trying to say with that. I think I don't remember if it was Rob or Simon that talks about how it's almost like they've almost forgotten about Japan's history, which I think is interesting. Or it's also almost like this film is very much about like America's influence over Japan since World War II, which I think is really interesting. It's just a really, sad and scary film about how precarious life is in,
about how powerless.
And about how you lose your job and your entire life can just completely fall apart straight away.
The family dynamic, just on that, I wanted to sort of follow up on that. It's interesting the roles that this sort of constructs and deconstructs, because the whole idea of Japan as seniority is everything. There's stories of people who get promoted not because they're good at the job, but just because they're older. And that's how sort of the employment structure works in that country. And it sort of translates into the way that the family dynamic works in that household, how he demands, I can't remember the word he used, but he demands, was it not respect that he says?
Status. I think it's status, because she then says to him, fuck your status.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's like such a weird dynamic that the family has, and I think there's a great joy in Kurosawa and sort of deconstructing that and making the father, who wants all this status and wants respect and wants to be in command of his family, reveals him as a bit of a shallow, very small man who has no control over anything, really.
Yeah, like he says no to his son going to war, says no to his son playing the piano, but they both do anyway, and he never gives a reason why he says no. He just, I think he says to his son at one point, like the youngest one who sort of talks back to him, he says like, if you don't understand me, just tell me. But when he does tell him, he doesn't try to make himself understood at all. So it's impressive to have a character who is objectively quite horrible, I guess, in many ways, but you still feel some degree of sympathy because it is sort of the conditions has pushed him to this level of desperation. As is everyone else, they're all just seeking a way out in some way or the other, aren't they?
One thing I particularly liked about this, a lot of Kurosawa's scares are generally very cinematography based. And the cinematography here, he uses focus very deliberately. And it's not always the thing which is happening in the scene. It's quite often the person in the background and how they're sort of perceiving it. There's like, on those scenes where the family's arguing, it'll be the dad with one of the sons, and the camera will be focused on the mother in the background and how she's sort of taking it all in. It's just that it shows what Kurosawa's really focusing on in any given moment. And I always thought it was an interesting aspect of Tokyo Sonata. It makes it a little bit more complicated than just what's on the surface there.
Definitely, and it's like the way I really noticed that it's sort of how he blocks stuff out in the framing. Like it's a bit early on where the dad has lost his job. He's sat outside eating his bad porridge or whatever it is. But then, so you get one shot of him just sat on the bench, and then there's another shot which is just a little bit further back of two guys talking that he overhears, and then it sort of goes back in. But it's not in like continuous shot. It's just like two separate shots, which are going back and forth. And it's just it's very interesting to show that, like you're saying about where the focus is.
It's the same with a shot when they're having a meal. It's not like shot in a normal manner. It's like shots way back, and you can see sort of the stairs in the foreground and them in the background, so you can kind of see some people, you can't see others.
I think most of the dad is particularly cut off there, but they're waiting for him to like finish his beer so he can say, "Well,
can I just say,
start dinner."
The way that he pours that beer is absolutely psychotic.
So much head.
Vertically down, the head on that beer, man. It's absolutely insane.
How is he enjoying that?
Sip is like just inhaling gas. I was just like, this man is
that must
he's reached his breaking point if that's how he's pouring that beer. Crazy.
That must have been the best take, because otherwise, why on earth would he wanted to do the beer like that? But to me, even that is part of it. He just wants, you know what, I want a beer, and I'm going to make my family wait to eat. You can see them getting a little bit restless. Yeah. And there's another great dinner scene where he goes round to his friend's house, and the whole thing with his friend is he learns that his phone goes off 5 times an hour because he's been unemployed for 3 months, but to make him look like he's still at work and doing important business. But then he comes back from his fake phone call to the dinner table, and he sort of tries, almost like a weird role play with the protagonist, who sort of goes along like, "Oh, you should have done that report on time." It's this very awkward, strange performativeness, which I guess is all the way through the idea of like the roles you choose to perform, and and obviously this comes to the son as well in terms of he's found an outlet through piano playing. He's got so desperate he takes a piano off the street, but it's being stifled whenever he gets home. He has to sort of hide it in his room and sort of sign it. And it's a broken. It's so sweet because this broken keyboard doesn't make any sound, but then he's like as he's starting to learn stuff, he's like making the noises as he's doing the keys correctly, and it's very, that whole storyline reminded me a lot of Monster, the film that came out this just similarly sort of like following different characters, different stories, but all interlinked, and ultimately sort of comes out all about a sort of child wanting to sort of express themselves, which I also loved as well. And this was there's that very humanistic thing, which I think, before we talk about like his moody, creepy atmosphere, because I was very good with people. They all feel like real, and that's obviously a testament to the actors and how he directs them and how they perform it, obviously. But they feel like a real family in a real world, a version of the real world.
Special mention has to be brought to Koji Kusho, who's kind of his De Niro to Scorsese's De Niro, basically. Yeah, they have that sort of relationship, and he is the instigator behind, I guess, the biggest moment of horror in the whole thing, where he ties up the wife and then they go on a road trip together in a really weird.
It starts as a horrible home invasion, then turns into a comedic driving lesson, and then goes to sort of an assault, and then into a moment of sort of self-realization. They go that whole storyline goes with such a shift of tones completely. But again, you sort of follow it all the way through.
Yeah. And there's context there. He's a failed, locksmith?
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's good at breaking.
Yeah, she assumes he's a criminal because he says that he was really good at picking locks, and she's like, "Oh my god, you're a bank robber." And he's just like, "No, I'm just a locksmith."
That's so sad. It's just a really bit where he's ready to like go out and walk out normally as if nothing has happened, and he comes rushing back in because he's a police car. And then he realizes she's seen his face. It's that lovely breaking of tension before then. She's like, "Can I get my coat and purse?" And absolutely bonkers that works at all, because this shouldn't work. You shouldn't have like a tense home invasion in the middle of this sort of drama about everyone struggling in capitalist society, and you've got this nice weird comedic, almost a meet cute to, it's almost played as to go between a robber and a poor housewife.
There's so many good Japanese movies like this in the sort of contemporary era. One which nobody talks about, but it's Toshiaki Toyoda, who did a movie called Hanging Garden, I think it was called, which is about a family, none of whom can lie, and it's just about how that family disintegrates in very catastrophic ways, and it's just a very cathartic little genre that Japan have. There's nothing special about it, but just talking about it the other day for I think it was Jonathan Glazer's Birth. There's so many New York sort of family dramas where the family falls apart, but to see somebody do that in a way which is sort of unique and one of a kind and has something compelling and interesting to say, so rare. And it's the same here. It's like a family is falling apart, a Japanese drama about a family disintegrating, but there's more going on there beneath the surface than just another one of the many, I guess. But Autumn, Simon, any other thoughts on Tokyo Sonata before we wrap up with it?
I had one, and it sort of links to what I think it was Andrew was saying in the last episode about whether or not Kiyoshi Kurosawa is epileptic, particularly in regard to Kiwa and Chime, where flashing lights do sort of act as punctuation points before moments of violence and psychosis. And one thing that really struck me in Tokyo Sonata is that they do, in fact, live next to a train line.
Yeah.
And every time a train passes, you can damn well see it coming through the house, or the light of the train coming through the window, and it does act in a similar way to add those moments of sort of high tension and sort of disassociation from the moment. So I think particularly after watching this for the first time, after Chime, again, my back went up, hairs were standing up on my arm, and I was like, oh, no. Please don't stab somebody in the back repeatedly. I'll be very pissed off if you do.
It's much more horrifying what really happens in those scenes. The domestic abuse, it's so ugly. But tragic at the same time.
But yeah, I just thought he's kind of obsessed with that motif in a way, and I enjoyed seeing it here, despite its raising my heart rate in that way.
Autumn, anything else?
I guess one thing I thought about this was actually, compared to a lot of his other films, this actually has quite a lot happening versus some of his he's very known for like I don't know if anyone's seen, I think it was on someone suggested it for this episode, but it's called like Barren Illusion, like one of his like 1999 films. Like nothing happens, like literally 90 minutes of like nothing, which is I think it's a great film, but and also like even Serpent's Path, like it's not there's not that much meat on the bones in terms of story, whereas this is very much like there's a lot of story. Like it in many ways feels like a drama that would win awards. I think actually it did win an award. Saying that. Did he?
Oh yeah, I think it did. It did.
Did it win the Palme d'Or?
Was it a Cannes? Yeah.
Was it Palme d'Or? Did it win?
It won Uncertain Regard, I think. But yeah, it did really win Cannes.
Yeah.
Oscar nominated Japan's nomination for that year, I think, as well.
For the Oscars.
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But obviously it's not like it's not a typical drama, but it has a bit for Kurosawa. It is like much more story driven than I think a lot of his other films are. Even before We Vanish, which we'll go on to next, like that really doesn't have much going on in terms of story. And it's also it's not so grey and unclear. Like there's it has an ending that maybe there's not everything is resolved, but it does have like an ending, and it has story and acts, I guess you could say. So it's interesting seeing him work in this, like, I don't know, mode of filmmaking that you don't really see him with that much. Which, but as I said, it still turns into a horror film. And I think that's kind of like, you're talking about the blocking. I think that's, for me, that is it. That's why he is so good. I think he has. It's interesting because he has this, like, sort of Hitchcock. I guess also people like Fincher. This, like, super control over the camera. Like, it's not like loose. I don't think it's quite like very, like, movements are very, like, he's doing them on purpose, and they're all for a reason. But it doesn't feel like robotic or either. Like, it's very like. It's almost like he, I remember reading, like, Hitchcock used to, like, do, like, storyboards of everything, like every single shot, and it was very planned, so he knew what he was doing. But it kind of feels like that's what he's done, but like just like an hour before he's shot the film. Like, it's like weird. It's very planned, but it doesn't feel like it's so preconceived that it feels like, oh, this isn't. I obviously love Hitchcock. I'm not trying to diss on the man, but, like, it doesn't feel so, like, obviously like like sometimes Hitchcock films can feel a bit like you're on, like, a roller coaster intentionally. Whereas it kind of feels really organic, but the movements feel very planned. Like, and just as Rob was saying, like the foreground and the background and stuff. I think that's, there's, I think it was before. I can't remember which one it was I watched recently, but it has, like, it's just like it will have, like, he's very good at, like, the camera pan where it's like it's so ominous, like, when he does it, like when he starts, like, moving the camera diagonally or something, you know something is awful is gonna happen, but you just have no clue what's coming. And I think those kind of movements and blocking that just really it's where the horror comes from, right? That's what someone mentioned earlier. That's what he's good at. He's good at making every scene feel scary. And all the dinner scenes in this, that, like, have this, like, weird tension to them, and you don't really know what's gonna happen. But because it's any other director, you'd kind of, I don't know, you wouldn't. It's like almost like cosmic dread, but all you're doing is watching, like, a family drama about people eating, and people are eating dinner. But it has this, like, weird, almost like like cosmic horror to it. You're just like, I have literally no clue what's gonna happen. Like something absolutely terrible is gonna happen. So it's interesting. I think it's also, I was just looking, like, the budget was like 2.5 mil, which I think is probably quite high for Kurosawa. So it's interesting. Yeah, this is kind of like his. I guess is this his biggest film? I guess Cure is probably bigger in terms of, like, cult following and pulse, but is this like
this feels like his most, like, respectable film, quote unquote.
Which is,
it's the family issue. The movie you could show to your family. Most of his stuff you really can't. So,
well, I guess what kind of family, depends on what kind of family you've got. I don't know.
A well-adjusted family, hopefully.
So I think it's interesting that this is, like, his most like award-ish kind of, like, drama film, and it's still this creepy. This is, like, a very, like, strange.
That was the thing that put me off watching it for so long, because I heard it was his Oscar-nominated movie, so I thought, it's a little bit awards baity, and I thought I shouldn't have really been worried about it. It's Kiyoshi Kurosawa. It's not going to be like that. Of course, it's not going to be like that. No.
侵略が始まったの？
いや、あれは夕日だ。
何があったの？
その代わりに俺が彼の記憶や知識を引き継いで。
お分かりですか？あなたの身にも危険が迫っているんですよ。
全面戦争ですか。
まともに戦える相手ならいいんですが。
目的は地球の侵略。どう？ピンときた？
That brings us to the final movie of Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Before We Vanish. Who wants to take a stab at that? Autumn? I don't think you've done a synopsis yet.
So this is sci-fi to a degree. I don't want to say it's a very it's a very strange sci-fi film, but essentially about aliens who take the form of humans and are trying to steal what they call concepts from humans, which involves permanently removing it from the brain of the human. For example, one I thought was very funny scene, an alien takes the concept of possession from a man who then no longer understands what possessions are and becomes very happy. Also,
yes.
And then there's like there's basically two narrative strands. One is a woman whose husband disappeared for like 3 days, then comes back as an alien who doesn't understand what's going on, and so they kind of learn. I don't know if anyone here has seen Twin Peaks: The Return, but I got a lot of like there's a Dougie Jones vibes, from these aliens, which I thought was very funny. And then the second narrative strand is a journalist who's essentially guiding these other two aliens to collect these concepts, even though they tell him repeatedly that they're going to invade his planet and kill him, which was very funny. And so it's an interesting, really odd film. I think what I thought was really interesting about this, and I don't know how intentional it's talking about the politics of Tokyo Sonata. This film has an alien that comes down, and the three things he takes from people are the ability to know about possessions, which makes someone very happy. The concept of the family, which also makes someone very happy and like leaves and goes away to Tokyo, and also the concept of work, which also makes the person very happy, which I thought was a very interesting Marxist. They're like Marxist aliens that are basically taking capitalist structures from us and making us happy, which I thought was a very strange. I don't know if Kurosawa intentionally made this some like film about communism, but as soon as he took possession from the man and he runs up to him and goes like, "You've made my life so much better," I thought it was very interesting political commentary from Kurosawa there. Well, actually, I don't know if he wrote it.
It was a shut-in before that, wasn't he? He said it was a shut-in. Yeah. You've took away the concept of possession, and he's changed his life so much.
Yeah. So I thought that was a very interesting concept, and also it kind of reminded me a bit of I've seen people compare it to Starman by John Carpenter. Also, sort of maybe it's not really the same, but like AI by Steven Spielberg, and I can't remember another Spielberg film. I can't remember, but just this idea that like this alien who's like married to this woman, he's like they almost kind of re-fall in love, even though he doesn't really understand what love is, which I thought was there's. I don't know if anyone's seen Journey to the Shore, which is the film he did like just before this one, which is also sort of about love in a very strange way. I think it's interesting how his later films are sort of about love. It's quite a romantic film, actually, I thought. And
considering how nihilistic he was of his earlier movies, it's nice. It's nice to see him calm down a little bit.
Yeah, and I still think there are still elements. I think this is definitely the least like horror-driven than the other two. But given that the film opens on that scene of that woman being like dragged back into the house, I was like, oh my god, is this just going to be a horror film? But it's not really. Although the last thing I will say is I think someone mentioned the shootout in Serpent's Path, and I think the action in this is filmed very weirdly, in a good, like intentionally. I think like in a sort of like almost like nonchalant, like very unembellished sort of like there's no pizzazz given to it. It's just like very functional action and like gunfire, gun shootouts and stuff. Like it's it doesn't feel like you're watching like a Hong Kong action film or like a Hollywood shootout. They're very just like brutal, blunt.
It reminded me a little bit of the action in Children of Men, actually. The long take at the end of Children of Men. Yeah, there's a particular shootout at the end of this where a character is taking on a huge missile drone with a tiny submachine gun. And the destruction that is wreaking around him is very, very Children of Men.
See, I still felt that ending was also a little, almost in a weird way, like the ending of Pulse, particularly obviously with like a big plane showed up at the end. That's what it reminded me of.
Funny these sort of touch points that this has brought up, though, because the music on this made me think of Danny Elfman and Tim Burton stuff. It's very alike, and the tone is much alike.
John Williams.
Oh, well, okay, that's two very different answers.
I thought the harps were very, very John Williams, actually. In fact, I'm going to bring up a specific Spielberg reference point here, because there's a musical refrain in this that's very kind of bum 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 bum, which is almost exactly the same as the part in Spielberg's War of the Worlds where the tripod emerges out of the ground.
Oh, okay.
And it's got that same sort of impending doom from the horn section,
As Autumn said at the top of the episode of because I likes The Lost World and Indiana Jones, so maybe he's a big
Spielberg boy.
Fan, maybe this was his attempt at like a Spielbergian. E.T.
I think E.T.
I think it is.
Yeah, that's 100%.
It's the pointing of the finger to
oh my god, yeah,
people. So yeah,
I knew that.
Oh, wow, that's such a good spot. It is love letter to Spielberg. I didn't think of that.
Yeah,
it reminded me of Bong Joon-ho's The Host. That's what Marvel's.
Yeah, yes. I did. Yeah, I got that as well. I felt it felt like his sort of take on like almost like a 50s B movie alien invasion movie in many ways. Just in the sort of like, there's a weird. I'll be honest, this one I didn't vibe with as much, but I did find it. I found it interesting, definitely. But there's a weird stiltedness to it. The way, like, it's very ordinary. It's a very sort of undramatic invasion in a weird way, which is quite interesting because it's just sort of, I guess, because it's sort of a information gathering, basically, is what all they're doing until they reach the point. It's like, okay, we've gathered information, and now we're going to wipe out the Earth, basically.
Did you not find it funny at all? Because I found it very funny when it chooses to be.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I found it quite amusing.
I thought the aliens were so funny.
He has that reputation of being a bit of a sourpuss and humorless, but when he wants to let it out, he really does let it out, and I think this is one of the big examples. Yeah, Before We Wish.
Yeah, I thought the journalist character was quite funny. When he I don't know. When he just like sees these like aliens like murder these cops, and he's just like, there's a really funny line where she's like, you hate cops, and he's like, I do, but still, like besides the point or something like that.
Yeah.
Like these aliens don't really understand what he means when he says he doesn't like the police officers.
Yes, yeah.
Which I also interestingly, I thought this film really reminded me of, and this is I like this film. Like many people hate it. Shyamalan's The Happening. Because it's very stilted, it's very weird, and has lots of just violence that just kind of comes out of nowhere, and has this like weird conspiracy medical element. Also, I would just like to Kiyoshi Kurosawa and M. Night Shyamalan, I'm pretty certain of actually friends, and they like each other's films. So
I was about to say, do we know if they? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they definitely they are. Yeah, I think so. I've definitely seen.
I've
definitely seen Kurosawa talk about Shyamalan. I don't know the other way around.
I love that.
But there is a.
That's nice. I can't wait for Kurosawa's Trap.
Wow.
Oh, sign me up.
Maybe his other film this year will be like Trap. Well, it's funny though, because I thought this Knock at the Cabin and The Happening have these like bits of just like I follow someone on Letterboxd, so I talked to him quite a bit, and he compared it. I can't remember what it's called. It's called like Den. There's like a type of Japanese manga like Den Dempa, which is like basically kind of about like, it's about like delusion, and like it has a lot of like a big theme of that is like suicide and like The Happening and like Knock at the Cabin. All these like Shyamalan films are very like have like these like random bursts of just like people just committing suicide. That doesn't happen in Before We Vanish, but just this like weird similarities between the two. This like
you say that, but it might have happened because you do get these little snippets towards the end of just anarchy and people sort of losing control.
Yeah.
So might have been part of what was going on there.
I did love that the 360 shot in that hospital where you just sort of sit and watch the chaos unfold, sort of thing. And it's not even 100% clear. Like, I'm guessing it's just a side effect of them stealing concepts of people's minds, but it is almost like hysteria. It's like, it's not really, especially when there's like one guy in like a medical suit who just walks on and just suddenly sort of goes loopy.
Yeah, he does.
That was quite fun.
Yeah,
I did like that. Yeah.
No, I was going to say also it's kind of. I think it's interesting how many people are affected by it, given that we're always there's only from what the film tells us, there's only 3 of these aliens, and they're like surely they're not. I don't know. It doesn't really like. It's just like there's a lot of gaps in a good way. I'm not saying that he needs to explain everything, but like, yeah, it's just it is very much like someone compared to Pulse. I think it is very much like Pulse. It has this like apocalyptic feel to it, especially like the kind of like films like Coda at the end, where he's sort of there's like 1 month later, and like we have this bunker, and like that's very that felt very like Pulse sort of to me, and this idea of like, because to me, I know this isn't a horror episode, but to me like Pulse was almost about like technology sort of it's like technology spurring on the end of the world, and this is like I don't really know what is causing the end of the world. Like the alien invasion is like very,
I guess, apathy. Because the whole thing about it is if we just loved each other and liked each other a bit more, the world would be a much better place to live in.
Yeah, that's true. And there is that whole thing about like the Japanese army going to war with like a mysterious, like no one knows what they're going. Like it's never really mentioned what they're going to war for, but it's like they're going to war for something. And at first, I thought they were going to the idea, the kind of point was that they were going to war against these aliens, but they don't know about. I think there must be like there's like that. The idea is that there's like something is going on in this world that's not right, basically.
There's one government department really that's fighting them.
Yeah, and they're saying it's a virus, but I was always like uncertain. Like, are they just saying it's a virus like as a cover, and they actually know it's aliens, or do they just not know it's aliens? That's which is an interesting little ambiguities. There's a few ambiguities like scattered.
Yeah, I assumed that they knew, and it was like a cover-up, sort of like conspiracy.
Yeah, that's my assumption. Yeah. Did you know this is based on a stage play, apparently, which, like, God knows what that stage play looked like.
I thought that was an original writer.
I could sort of see it. Yeah, so I guess I could sort of see it as a stage play, but God knows what that would look like.
The stage plays in Japan are very, very different than stage plays in England and America as well. Yeah.
For sure.
It's also made into a TV show as well. By Kurosawa, he made a spin-off TV show.
Oh, was that
It's called
Penance?
No, that's
something else.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm just trying to.
Oh no, there's another one. Oh, yeah, what was it called?
I think it's just called Invasion.
Yeah,
because it is effectively it is effectively Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but the most mundane version of that possible. Yeah, really.
It was.
I think that's its strength though, because it reminded I would love to keep bringing back Cure into this, but it's that mundanity of the aliens getting inside your head that's very much like Mamaya in Cure, in the way that he asks questions of people and keeps grilling them like a child would.
And that is quite sinister. It is quite sinister here. They just said, "I'll take that." Like, the first time it happened, it is like, "What are you going to take?" It is a disconcerting thing, and I think there's a lot of fun, like Alter was saying, about how people change when they can't conceptualize a certain thing. I particularly like the guy who loses both the concept of self and other people, so just assumes that everyone is him. And I personally would like to see more of that, but I think it works enough for that gag, and then just moves on. which is quite
I think he offers like a really cruel gag at one point as well, where he goes into let's call him the good alien, Shinji. He goes into a choir, a children's choir, and starts asking them what love is. And I was like, please do not steal the concept of love from this crowd of 20 children. And it's a nice little bait and switch in the way that he doesn't. And I think the way that gets engineered into the emotional core of what happens later on is really nice. But yeah,
actually,
you're right, there are some funny gags in there.
And on the flip side, there's the one where there's the bad boy alien, the teenage alien, who's taking stuff from the kid's parents, and there's like the mummies take the concept of freedom away, and she's just sort of pottering around the house and so.
He says I've taken a lot from them, and they're just sort of empty shells of people.
Yeah,
one of them's just watching cartoons, and I can't remember what the dad's doing at that point.
He's just sitting in his chair. I think he's just sitting there and doing anything.
Yeah. And then there's the girl as well. Again, there's these little dashes of horror. Like the little girl talk about like when she first arrives, I was in the goldfish, then I hopped into an old man, and then I hopped into the old woman, and I ripped out my insides to see what it looked like, and then I realised I was dying.
A very Final Destination opening as well, where she's just walking along the middle of the road, and you can see like a articulated truck coming from the behind, crashes over.
Yeah, like Autumn, I was like very thrown by that opening. I was like, what, oh god, what kind of film is this going to be? And then it sort of shifts into a bit more low key, following that sort of quite a striking opening.
Which I think is interesting when you think about Spielberg, because Spielberg obviously has like quite a mean streak in him. Like, I think it's literally interesting. Is it like in Jurassic Park 2 where like someone's literally like eaten alive by like a dinosaur? I don't know if it might be in the third one. There's like a bit where like
Jurassic Park is a few. I'm the guy in the car.
Jurassic Park 2 is very sadistic.
and Kiyoshi Kurosawa is listed as one of his favorite films of all time. So
there you go.
So just this like.
I bet he loves Temple of Doom.
That was also on there.
He likes mean Spielberg.
Really? Okay. Wow.
He likes mean Spielberg specifically.
Yeah, but even like War of the Worlds has this like very and like Minority Report and stuff has these like it's not entirely bleak, but it has these like bursts of just like cruelty that I think feels like this film has to be, or like not just this film, but like in general, his films in general have this. They have these mean streaks in them that just kind of appear out of nowhere. And they're like, I think they make the softer bits, I don't know, more interesting. Like the bits in the film that are like almost like the romance parts just kind of feel strange because you almost don't trust him to like give you romance or give you like some joy or some softness because you've kind of watched it. He's very good at like pulling the rug and giving some sort of fear when there's not supposed to be fear. So I think even in the bits where they're sort of like rekindling their romance, you don't really, I don't know. You're always kind of on edge when you watch his films, especially in this one. I think this is it's a very strange. It's very strange. I think because they say that in the film that you can't. The aliens say like you can't see our real form, and I'm just really curious what Kiyoshi Kurosawa would have made them look like if he had like the budget or possibly if it was part. I wouldn't know what it's very clever that they don't reveal what the aliens look like, but
it comes back to the epileptic thing. Like right at the beginning, we saw obviously some flashing lights across the house door at the start, and I guess that's the closest we ever get to what they might be like.
Just on that strangeness, there was one thing that really stood out for me. It's kind of a mundane strangeness as well. It's when I can't remember his name, Shin-chan. She calls him all the time.
Yeah,
Shinji. Yeah. His wife goes to work and she presents this option for the new mall, and he says, "What's this? Don't be creative. Just look at somewhere else successful and copy that. Don't you know what work is?" And I thought, wow.
She just stole something. Yeah. She just stole something from an online artist. Yeah. Which is interesting.
It's a weird perspective, really. And it is nice to see him have the concept of work removed from him because he basically turns into a 6-year-old who likes throwing paper out of pins and smashing stuff.
That was.
And maybe the wife's the wife's reaction is like, no, I need this for work. she's really annoyed about the fact that her boss is it's just quite a funny reaction.
He's a slightly. I mean, this guy's reputation of being very slow, but I don't think it is. There's constantly stuff happening, and the character dynamics, and it's funny, and there is action throughout it, so it's kind of a misrepresented a little bit, this one.
Yeah, I think it's comedy in all of his stuff. Like, even if it's quite dark comedy, or if it's in flashes of comedy, but he's definitely like you say. I think this comes out the most. Like Simon mentioned the shoot it man versus plane sequence at the end, which is I think deliberately just a bit ridiculous, but it's I don't know, it'd be quite fun, and it definitely feels quite Spielberg in a sense, I guess.
I think it's very funny. I think he's a funny director in general. I think most of his films have some elements of comedy in them.
Agree. Yeah.
If not,
even Pulse. That's you got a dig for that one.
I feel like there is. I can't. To be fair, I actually only watched it. I've watched it a bunch of times. I think last time was last year, but I'm sure has to be at least one funny moment in Pulse. Has to be at least one funny bit.
Well, I'll hold you to that the next time I watch it.
Next time I watch it, I'll make a note of the bits I laugh at. Which probably isn't that. Yeah, okay, not every film, but in especially his I don't know, I say non-horror isn't the right word, but his lighter films, which is, although Journey to the Shore actually isn't that funny. It's just very, very sad, but it does have some.
Oh yeah, that's the movie. If I remember correctly, it's about a woman being given a second chance to say goodbye to a dead husband, and they do it in the woods.
Yeah,
Marble Asano's in it, and it's quite sad.
He takes her on a trip to meet all the people he met when he died, and they're all also all dead. It's very good actually. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen To the Ends of the Earth. Yeah, it's sort of probably the next one I watch, but it's an interesting trilogy of I think it would have been creepy. Oh no! Actually, no. Sorry, he made creepy before Journey to the Shore, before We Vanish, so that doesn't count. I was going to say a trilogy of dramas, but actually it was.
Well, To the Ends of the Earth is definitely like a drama, and I would say it's quite light and it's quite funny in places actually. But also sort of has almost as like a musical number of Sound of Music towards the end. So it does seem like it's a really lovely film. Again. So yeah, I think you're right. I think as a trilogy, I mean, they seem like a light Kiyoshi trilogy. If I'm sort of seeing it in a good mood.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to end this really. I mean, other than asking for recommendations from people from Kiyoshi Kurosawa movies that we haven't covered. We've covered a lot over these 2 episodes. But is any within his filmography that really stand out for you that maybe need that light shining on them a little bit more?
You know what? I think I've covered every single one of the films that I've seen out of his filmography today. Except, and I'm going to look up the title of it, but I think it is entitled Beautiful New Bay Area Project.
Oh, yeah,
which is a 29-minute one, which I can't really remember. But I'm looking at my rating of it, and I gave it 3 stars, so it must be okay.
I think
that's the only one I've
good action-y stuff in it. I think.
Yeah, I've seen.
Yeah. There's a lot of martial arts on it.
Yeah,
in it, I think. Yeah, but it's only 29 minutes. It used to be on Mubi.
Yeah, that's why I saw it.
So, yeah. I wonder if it'll ever come back there one day.
Yeah,
I think cycle.
I would recommend. Wait, what films did you cover on the horror one again?
Crime,
Retribution.
Yeah.
Did you Retribution? Okay, well I was going to recommend that, which is a great film. But failing that, I would say I really think Loft is very good horror. There's one scene I won't spoil particularly, but it's very, very creepy. It's also very interestingly about mummies. And also, there's his first French language film, daguerreotype. I can't say it. The form of photography, daguerreotype, which is very not well liked, I don't think, by I don't think it did very well. But I think it's really French for starters. Just it's, you know, it is quite long and slow, and it is a horror as well. I think that's kind of how I would a horror romance about. I don't know. I thought it was really, really beautiful. I don't. It felt very much like a Jacques Rivette film, who's like my favorite French director. So that was quite good. Yeah, I recommend checking it out, especially if you're going to go watch his second French language film. It's interesting to see what he does. Actually, I think it's interesting to see what he keeps the same. It's interesting because the sort of I think Loft is actually set in the countryside, which I thought was interesting. But most of Kiyoshi Kurosawa's films are kind of set in like the urban space, whereas this film is set on like I think early 1900s, late 1800s, like French mansion in like the countryside, which was like interesting to see him sort of work in a completely different like it's not. I think a lot of I think Kiyoshi Kurosawa's. I think one of the things I think is actually interesting about his films is that he is very contemporary. Like his films, he doesn't do period films. He doesn't do like. I mean, Wife of a Spy was a period film. That's he does do some, but like he doesn't really do like films, historical films. They're all kind of set in like what it looks like modern Japan, whereas this is like him going back into like old aristocratic France, which I thought it's just really interesting how so much of his Japanese work is very like nothing really changes, but the location is so different. It's just very interesting, and it's also about like the act of like taking. It's like about photography and taking images and like being obsessed with like the perfect image, which is I think it's quite autobiographical of maybe. So yeah, I'd recommend that one for sure.
Mike, yourself before we wrap up.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mention, Journey to the Shore, To the End of the Earth is really lovely. So there's a very, in terms of non-horror ones, I'll recommend again just because I always like to shout out about it's the Guard from the Underground because I got a photo window release, so you can actually get that one quite easily.
Yeah, it's quite hard
that's
to
quite
get for
a good. So that's a good early horror sort of mix of sort of cosmic horror and slasher. Well, a dash of cosmic horror.
I mean, is it amazing that we didn't do Pulse on either episode, but for the scariest stains in cinema history, that's your movie. And that sounds really enigmatic, but that's what it is.
If you don't like mold, which if you do like mold, then please get seen to. But it'll get to you.
Actually, it's interesting when we talk about like what's his most well known from is with Pulse. It's such an obvious one you sort of forget about it in a way. Like he's probably the break, like Pulse is probably the breakup one. And it's interesting why that of all his horrors is the one that sort of seems to be most seen.
It's because it's so scary.
I think he just got bundled with that J horror boom. It was one of the big ones, wasn't it?
I think like scariest films ever made. I think Pulse comes up as like number one basically. He's managed to like I just googled scariest films ever, and like the third one is Pulse. So I think he's definitely
it's up there.
it's like it's dominated that Watch Mojo top 10 scariest films of all time. Sort of, it's entered the mainstream through that sort of like how scary it is.
Yeah. Why is it popular? Because it's good.
Yeah, I think it is. It's because it's fucking scary. This is really...
Yeah.
But the thing is about Kuro, it's scary, but it is also really, really bleak. Like it's not just like I think that's quite J horror in general, isn't it? Really, like it's not just scary. Like it's miserable.
It's bleak even by J horror standards.
Yeah.
I feel like an early internet film, it holds up quite well in terms of what it's doing with how it's tackling the internet, even if like specific technology, I guess.
Pretty accurate as well. Pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So, Autumn, where can we find you and the stuff you do online?
So my Letterboxd and Twitter handle is just Autumn T Parker. Just writing Actually, just in the middle of a master's dissertation, which means I'm not doing anything really, apart from writing that. But yeah, hoping to carry on. Just trying to write about as many westerns as possible, and that's it.
Excellent. And Mike?
So I'm on Letterboxd at Mike Leach, and probably best by me at Autistic Horror on various social medias. So there's a blog on there.
Excellent. And Simon, yourself?
Yep, I write for The Geek Show. I also write for Asian Movie Pulse. My X handle is Simon Ramshaw, and so is my Letterboxd handle. And that's where most of my thoughts are.
Excellent. And you can find me across all social media, including the ones where the password has gone to the wind, at Uncut Rodcast. Now this episode's done and dusted, we're going to be having a month's break. In that time, if you want to get in touch with the show, please do. We have an email, and I've neglected to completely mention it in any episodes, so that is directorsuncutpod@gmail.com. Get in touch with that in this month's break with anything that you want to bring up with me, really. If you've got a comment for the show and you want it to be read out in the next season, by all means, go ahead. We like to have conversations with the people who are listening, whether it's on social media or whether it's through this email account. So there's that. When we come back in the new year, on the new season, I should say, we're not taking that much of a break. The first two episodes, I should say, because the first one was initially going to be Korean revenge dramas, but a little bit of a change of plan given the timing of things regarding another episode. So that first episode of season 4 will be a actors episode about Kyle Gollner, and then we'll be going into the normal sort of structure of 2 episodes for actors, directors, genres, loop around. I think that's it for this season, and please do give us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts from, and we will see you around 10th to 15th of October time, sorta, give or take. So enjoy your break from hearing my voice. Please do check back in when we come back, and as ever, thank you very, very much for listening. It's been much appreciated.